So welcome to those tuning in live. We've had a good turnout today, and also welcome and thank you to those watching the recorded version in the future from now. Today's webinar is brought to you by Glider, and we're going to be talking about bridging the construction to operations gap with digital soft landings. My name is Lucas Cusack, and I am the strategic lead for asset management at Glider. And I myself have always had an interest in closing gaps in our industry, and that is closing the gaps with the transfer of information from one stage to the next. So the first in my career, I was closing gaps between design and construction from the architectural consultancy point of view, and then I was doing it from construction to operation. And now I work in technology, where I'm closing gaps in the solutions that the industry needs to seamlessly define, capture, verify, manage, and exploit their asset information. This talk today is based on a panel discussion from Digital Construction Week at the start of this month, where I had a really excellent panel from the industry, and we debated the idea and need of digital soft landings. You could see those who were on the panel there, and some of the content that I'll talk about today was contributed by them. So it was really, really valuable and worthwhile exercise. I think they'll agree. It was all based on a hypothesis. So the hypothesis that I put forward to the panelists, which we'll sort of use as a basis today, was that the integration of digital information capture, verification, and the delivery practices within a structured soft landings framework isn't just beneficial, but it's essential for unlocking the full operational potential and value of buildings. And there you can read it. So that was what we debated. And this is a recap. So two really cool things that came out of it, which added to my perspective on the topic. One was knowledge transfer. So we're not just exchanging information, but we're transferring knowledge as well. So the contractors know an incredible amount about the building. As an example, like if you've ever had to do something purely via a manual and just felt the urge or had the need to ask someone for advice or additional advice, that's the knowledge that you don't have, that you can't get out of a manual. I thought that was really valuable. Just continuing. So assets, not activities. And this was probably my favorite. It's by Stephen Boyd. Prioritize the asset, not the activity. We're focusing always on the activities, usually aligned to REBA stages. So that's the REBA plan of work in the UK. But in the grand scheme, they don't matter after it's built. For the next few decades or 100 years of the building, that's useless. So the asset itself should always take priority when you're producing information. Digital maturity. So there's varying levels of digital maturity between clients and sectors, and we know that. But we should be aligning the information or data transfer needs to this. So not transferring more data than they need, and then not acquiring more data than they can use. The end user. So if not present, they're never properly represented. So too often that requirement or their requirements are nice to have, and they're engineered out. There's financial barriers, both financial and contractual, that don't encourage cross-stage collaboration, and that's between CapEx and OpEx, and the financial benefits for the perceived additional effort are not evenly distributed. And that was a really cool contribution from George Stevenson from Active Plan from the audience, and that's great. So like, what's the incentive for someone to do any extra work if all the benefits are going somewhere else? And then two great ones to finish off with. So engage from day one. So the operation and maintenance people and users, they should be engaged from day one, and then transfer from day one. So information as it's generated should be shared and transferred from day one. So we're going to continue now. Enough of the panel. We'll get back to that. But I presented these four themes to hone in on the problem rather, which I'll talk about, sort of giving them a slide each. So there's the paradox of information. Vast amounts of data is generated during design and construction. Sort of we know that, but it's quite a lot. And a significant proportion of this is lost, or it's not effectively transferred to operations. So it's a huge waste. And then the information gap means that there's crucial insights that people who really need them to run the building don't have them. So this is a cost. So there's the cost of the gap. It can increase operational costs due to inefficiencies. It can extend the defect resolution times. So the contractor's always going to be called back because things are wrong or there's snagging, etc. There's lack of alignment between the physical asset and documentation. Don't get me started on as-built models, but and then there's hindered performance and inability to unlock a building's full potential. So on the lack of alignment between physical asset and documentation, just to give some context, like imagine how frustrating it would be to put together an IKEA PAX wardrobe, which is frustrating enough in itself, when the instruction manual provided is slightly different to the bits you got in the box. The numbers of the parts were off, and it's showing a part that you don't have, and a couple of the pages are just missing entirely, right? That's the problem that facilities managers face every day, except they don't have PAX wardrobes, and arguably they don't have to build the equipment, but they've got equipment worth millions running, consuming loads of energy, providing critical infrastructure, and they've got this manual missing things in there that are incorrect, etc. So then we come to the soft landings problem. So there's an existing framework by BISRIA for smoother transition from operation to construction to operation, and that focuses on, is the building performing as it was designed? And this was a great step. It was supported by government soft landings. It advocates a structured approach to handover, which was great for tech and people in that sort of market. However, we go to the digital imperative. The traditional soft landings framework lacks a robust digital layer. And we sort of agreed this in the panel. There's a need to verify or capture and verify information in a usable and structured format. Digital soft landings can sort of like provide a proactive and seamless data and knowledge transfer. So that's what we want. We want the data and the knowledge, which is sort of like goes hand in hand to be transferred. And we're talking about this enormous data set. And we want to blur the line between CapEx and OpEx for whole life value. So that's like a huge thing, is like breaking down this barrier, closing the gap. So looking at a problem summary, here's a problem on a page. It's very oversimplified, and I put it out in my intro that, I was closing gaps from design construction. So that design and construction wedge of sort of information growing from zero to a lot, that's more of a sawtooth even in the process, from reverse stages, say 0 to 6. But there's always this data loss. And the operational team, sort of like on the other side of the cliff edge, they start with less information and capability to do their job, which on day one is really, really critical. So we want to minimize or prevent this data loss. And so the solution, so what exactly is it in practice, digital soft landings? It's more than a handover process. It's a comprehensive approach to ensure a continuous flow of information, and more importantly, knowledge. I keep banging on about that. But to bridge the gap and enable seamless data and knowledge transfer, we need to engage teams from both sides at critical decision points. So at the top, we need input during the design and construction, as what's required from the operational teams, and then on the lower side, we need to onboard the operations team to the data and the knowledge appropriately, and not just at the very end. And here is the sort of like the closing the gap and actually enabling this process to happen with a conduit or a consistent sort of like, it could be a person, it could be a framework, it could be tasks that are monitored. And as I was drawing this diagram and thinking, oh yeah, we need data drops at different points, I was reminded of a classic diagram, which some of you watching might remember. So those old enough to have labored through the PAS 1192 era will have worked to, or tried to work to, this diagram. And these circles at the bottom, these were the data drops and decision points. So like I noticed there's this big gap there in stage 5 where there wasn't a decision point. In the employees row, which is sort of in red. I could only find a grainy example of this, sorry, because it's so old. But yeah, I think PAS 1192 neglected to acknowledge that there were decisions to be made and data required for these operational stages. So, you know, there was a problem from the beginning, but that's enough nostalgia. So let's look at where we are today. And we're looking at traditional delivery. And I say traditional as in modern traditional. So this is where we actually are right now. We think we're doing things right. We have asset information requirements in place. The contractor is performing a handover using a digital O&M platform. There'll be COBie, there'll be data, 3D models, etc. Best case is we're still working in silos. The project deliverables are no doubt being handed over in one large sort of like handover at the end. So there's no progressive sharing of key information and data. And then those producing and managing the data are part of the capital phase. They've got a bias to produce and use data from their phase and their discipline. And BIM and SMART are still on different planets. So you can see these are 3 different work streams that are generating a lot of information, albeit the one at the bottom, which is the performance data, won't start generating information until the commissioning phase. But once you get into the operational phase, your BIM deliverables, information, it ends up being a static archive. The models become out of date very fast. You know, you'll see legacy Revit files, for example, 10 years old. Like, what can I do with that? They're incompatible because they might not have been asked for specifically. And by incapable, I mean the operations team. They don't know what they've got. They're not experts in BIM. You're giving them COBie files, and they don't know what COBie even is. So, and then we go to the O&Ms, and this is like your drawings, etc. Again, it's going to be a static archive. You're going to have missing information. You're not going to get everything that you wanted because you weren't there to ask for it in the beginning, and it's going to get duplicated to death. Like every department within the organization is going to have their own copy of stuff. They're not going to get updated copies. They're going to hack and edit copies, and there'll be just versions of stuff everywhere. And I've seen it. And then there's the performance data. So you potentially got delayed implementation because you've not had the right data to onboard it and then populate the platforms. It's going to be siloed because each vendors sort of have different information sets to base their performance data off, or their virtual points and the data that's being produced by them. It's unaligned, it's unstructured, it's unusable, it's unrealized potential. If you had dreams of doing smart building and digital twin stuff and analysis, it's going to be very hard when all your data sets are sort of uninteroperable. So let's look at what it could look like with a digital soft landing delivery. So at the top, what I've done is I've compiled everything that's asset data into one work stream. It's all your O&Ms and information, deliverables, COBie, IC, etc. It's all in one. It should be one. They're one and the same. We've aligned that to the performance data. So there's data being produced. So why isn't it aligned to the naming conventions, for example, that the static asset data elements are being adhered to? And then what happens, now we have the potential to maintain them in construction, or sorry, in operation, because we've maintained the link and we've got some sort of alignment between the two. And then you've got reliable information. You've got the ability to maintain it and make it live. It's going to be an interoperable. It's aligned. It's structured. It has huge potential, and that is just because we've done proper alignment from the beginning with input from operations, and so that we can continue it. And this is all enabled by this sort of like soft landings approach. So in a more detailed view, this is sort of like a framework across the Rebus stages. You've got 3 swim lanes at the bottom, which I'm going to populate. Got a digital soft landings manager, which doesn't have to be a separate person. It could be multiple governance. Don't treat it as a new role. You got the information manager. You got the platform. So the platform being like, it could be an environment, a accommodator environment. It could be a suite of software. It could be one platform. It could be Glider. So initially, the information manager will create information requirements. Don't get angry at me because I'm creating them in stage 3, but that's just kind of what happens a lot. But fair enough, they could have happened earlier on. But what the digital soft landings manager ensures is that there's engagement with the client and the operational team from early to capture those FM requirements. And then you're able to put these requirements into the contracts, and the tenders for the trades coming on board, and they all know what they're contracted to deliver. We want to configure a platform then. We need a way to verify this mass of information that's coming in and data. It's huge. And we're not going to do it with Python scripts, etc. Like you could try, but really there is good platforms out there. I could introduce you to one. So we want to configure a platform. So we then want to brief vendors who are going to supply and install operational tech. So the information managers briefing contractors of trades who come onto the project. We also want to brief like people who are going to not just install something like a physical object, but people who are going to install something that's going to produce a lot of data so that it is aligned. And then the information manager is able to use, or the whole team use the platform to verify this massive information that's coming in. Data commissioning side of it is that I want to then test the data that's coming from the BMS to say, yes, I know what that is, I know where it's coming from, and we can align and work with that in operation. I want to know that now. Then we have the handover of everything. This is the mass sort of like bulk delivery, but if we're doing things right, some of it would have been handed over at key points before then. And then your platform becomes a vehicle for that transaction of information. So it includes onboarding to the information itself and to the technology that they will interact with it. Digital soft landings person or role will help onboard the people. It's that sort of like soft touch where you onboard the operation teams to the data to say, like, this is your asset information model. This is the information that you have, what you can do with it. And then the fun just starts, really. So if you're in a commercial building and there's going to be loads of tenants coming in, that's one stage of construction you've just finished. And now there's going to be like lots more happening. So we're going to keep producing information. So the information manager could retain their role and do that work in operation. And then the platform adds all this information. It can be connected to other platforms via API so that they're all sort of using it as a single source of truth. The soft landings manager person role looks to maintain the asset information model and the alignment to the operational data, and then to importantly optimize and exploit it. Like that's the fruit of all this effort. So is that last box. That's all the things we can do with it. So I can make that available if you didn't have the chance to screenshot that. But that's my approach, my framework. And I want to give you an example now. So this is a real world example. I won't mention it by name, so you've got to guess, but I'll give you 22 guesses. So this is interesting. This is I didn't realize it at the time that I would be performing this role, right? And this is sort of like where the idea of digital soft landings came from. But this is sort of like me bridging the gap because I got to work both sides. So I had information requirements, models, and data to deliver. There was a separate digital O&M package, but I was heavily embedded with that, with the delivery, aligning my models and data to it. My goal, what I was doing, was to get procured on the operational phase, because truthfully, I wanted to sell them a digital twin product. But the client wasn't really sure. They understood like why they needed one and what they could do with it, but their interpretation of what one was really off. They thought, from what they saw in construction, they were getting one. And they're like, well, we'll just use the Revit models. I'm like, okay. there's 3 Revit models and about 400 other models in other formats, plus 80% of the data associated with them isn't in them. And then there's like 100,000 documents. So this whole thing took 100 people 5 years to build. So how do you plan to maintain it? And they're like, okay, that's good point. You've convinced us the value and the complexity. We'd like to keep you behind in operation as an information manager. So brilliant. So now I was heavily incentivized to do a really good job in construction, because if I hand myself over poor quality information, it's going to bite me in the operational phase. So something that I wasn't expecting or ready for was that, knowing that the client had someone secured for operation, that they, through me, had a conduit into construction and could enable a better transfer of information. So I was meeting, this was meeting the client, I was meeting vendors who were going to set up smart technologies and other things, and I was giving them access to data that they may not have otherwise had access to. So this allowed them to implement more rapidly and more aligned and effectively their operational data. And we fast forward to completion. I had with me a shed load of information that I was the custodian of, and I was able then to onboard the operational team, who could ask me questions. And without me, they probably wouldn't have known what they had access to or what was available to them. And we had dozens of tenants who were coming in and coming on board, who would also produce loads of information that we should really align to the base build, which we did. So we treated them as a mini project, albeit you might not consider a 50 million pound fit out as a mini project, but this was the scale of it. And it shows you the importance. So we created a protocol of delivery requirements for the tenants so they could deliver information consistent to what I manage in the main construction. And then loads more information got produced. And that's not a representation of duplicates, it's just scale, and it's all aligned. The client has a full digital paper trail of their asset. So that's the result of that. It's a real example. So like I said, it was not planned, but I learned a lot from it because I was really lucky. It was actually the second time in my career I got to sort of like straddle both construction and operation. Lessons that I learned, how would I do this differently? Earlier engagement. We're always wanting this as vendors in this space, but in this particular case, I was brought into the project well into stage 5. So it would have been great to have been earlier. We had an AIR, but it was speculative. It was data captured for operations that was assumed without the engagement because the people weren't there. So I wish they were. A lot of education and business case development had to take place to get the client on board. And some other people, smaller consultants or people on tight budgets, wouldn't have the bandwidth to spend the time and effort I had to do. But that's my job, and I do it now. So hopefully it's more standardized, and I'm helping sort of like develop the market so that in your case, there might be a solution and a budget in place for the future. I wish there was more opportunity to engage. It was ad hoc. We were doing this for the first time. I was only sort of had access to the vendors and the people that I was introduced to and who were wanting to engage with me. And so that's the last point. Because it was ad hoc, the vendors had no obligation to engage if they didn't want to. They didn't have to because they weren't contracted to. So changes in procurement all around. There's lots of commercial change that we need to make. So I compare those lessons learned from my own experience from sort of like doing it for the first time. Go back to the recap. It's quite similar, quite aligned. So a knowledge transfer and the assets and activities, be a digital maturity, the end user sort of being left out. I tried to overcome this, the financial barriers, of course, but then it's the engagement. So I was able to engage earlier and transfer a little bit earlier as well. So hopefully you can see that there's some alignment there. So what do we do next? Well, start by engaging outside your discipline. So information managers talk to master services integrators, MSIs. BMS vendors talk to the BIM manager. Information managers talk or engage with the client and end users. Start learning about what they're doing, because I guarantee you can help each other. You'll be amazed at actually like how much value you can offer them. And that might not interest you, but for me, it interests me a lot to help people. So if you're that sort of person as well, just go for it, show an interest. And yeah, focus on the activity. Sorry, the asset rather than the activity. And again, it's about showing an interest. So, like, what happens upstream? So, you spend a lot of time preparing your work package or your package of information. So, surely you should be interested in the value it brings to the recipient, because I'm sure in your mind you would have you would have imagined how they would use it. So, why don't you go and see actually if what you imagined is a reality? The next thing is just try it. Like, I gave you the framework. You could try bits of it. You could try and break it. Like, see if it works, and give us feedback. So talk to me, talk to Glider, ask for help, or introduce us to your projects, because we can provide solutions around this, and we can help you. This concludes the webinar.